Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Elliot. Wanted to mention something that's important to me, and that is our youth and family ministry program. We have kids over in Sunday school in the building just across the courtyard. Now that we're past Labor Day, we're trying to build our volunteer base again so that we've got. So you just have to do it like once a month. I know Anna Stracy's our youth and family ministry director. She has a chance to be in here with us today because of some volunteers. But especially we're looking for people who'd be willing to be with our 3 to 5-year-olds, our unitots. And if you'd be willing to do that once a month, we've got training and stuff like that. But and also, I know someone once asked me as far as if you volunteer in the nursery, do you have to change diapers? No. I mean, if there's a diaper that needs to be changed, we'll text the parent and let them know. But yeah, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd be willing to, like, once a month volunteer. I've got a sign-up sheet out on the credenza. Let us know, or like say Anna has a chance to get a respite and come in here for a change today. So good to see you. Well, good morning. A man had come back from a week-long business trip, and as he was settling in his home, his wife said to him, "You never take me out to dinner." And he started thinking about it. Well, that's not really true. I took you out to dinner on your birthday. We went out to dinner on our anniversary, and he started going through the calendar, not realizing that he was winning the battle but losing the war. There's something else up there, right? Yeah, granted, you've probably gone out to dinner before, but there's an underlying issue here, and here you're arguing about what's going on up here. A better answer might have been, well, what's going on? Tell me about this. Tell me more. Those 3 words can be magic. When suddenly there seems to be a rising conflict, looks like an argument might be coming, because maybe, just maybe, you're perceiving the situation in different ways. So getting down to, well, what's going on here can be a very effective way to engage conflict. Now, the man who actually did this was Gary Simmons, the author of the book Eye of the Storm. We're going to have Duncan put up the cover of the book. It's available over in our bookstore. So we're all kind of reading this book together during our Fearless Living series here in September and October. We're doing chapter 5 and 6 has been this week, and then from next week I'll be covering like the stuff in chapter 7. But the first week, Nothing and Nobody is Against Me. That got a lot of hits on Facebook Live. People wanting to know more about that. The affirmative prayer for that week was, the universe fully supports me in being all I am created to be. Second week was Embrace the Tiger. I embrace conflict with ease, being open to each new opportunity to stretch and grow my spiritual awareness. And the third week, Love your enemies. I release judgment about myself and others. I relax into oneness, rejoicing in the freedom of forgiveness and understanding. We also last week started an opportunity to do a 21-day reconciliation process with yourself. And I've actually got handouts out there on the credenza for those of you who might have missed, especially last week. Just 4 questions to ask yourself at the end of the day for 21 straight days, allowing you to just kind of recognize where we were out of integrity during that particular day, and being willing to put ourselves in a place of doing better the next day. So if you're having difficulty embracing the conflicts we've discussed so far, good. This is supposed to be a provocative book and a provocative topic. But my intentions in doing this is, one, so that each of us as individuals, can learn a healthier way of interacting with each other. And I've heard especially this week from people talking about, isn't it divine order that we're covering this stuff this week, considering all of the conflict that seems to be there. Also, as a community, Unity of Tampa, we've been through a transition. There are some issues that still need to be healed. Even if you don't think personally that there's anything going on within you, we do need to kind of collectively unload the baggage. And so coming up in 4 weeks on Saturday, October 27th, at the end of this 2-week theme of Fearless Living, we're going to get together for a 1-day seminar on Saturday, October 27th, called Honoring Our Past, Creating Our Future. And it'll allow us to just kind of get together, talk things through a little bit, and find out, there are things we do need to let go of, and if we want to embrace change, if we want to embrace conflict, this would be a good time to do it. And then, of course, our nation, our world. Imagine what it would be like if Everyone got the message. There's no need to be more spiritual because we're already spiritual beings having a human experience. So, like I said this week, 1 out of 3 women have been sexually assaulted. 1 out of 6 men have been sexually assaulted. So there's a lot of energy this week as people were trying to heal that stuff. And what was happening instead was people were not talking to each other and digging down deeper for what's going on down here instead of talking about what's going on up here. And instead you were talking at each other or past each other rather than, hey, what's really going on here? And I've heard from several people about other things that came up, like at work or whatever, and suddenly they're realizing, wow, divine order, I'm getting these tools at this time. So in the eye of the storm, of course, Gary Simmons uses the analogy of, the hurricane. And at the middle of the hurricane, as you get near close to the center are the worst winds, the strongest winds, but then suddenly there's this eye, there, might be 20 miles across, blue skies above, because all of the energy that's coming into this center is suddenly going up, finding balance, at that center. And so for us in our lives, we can see a world that seems to be in a hurricane, but if we're willing to get centered, we can see the big picture. We can be spiritual beings having a human experience. Now, let's admit that if we're tired, hungry, angry, lonely, depressed, there's going to be a greater likelihood of a breakdown in our centeredness. I'm going to have Duncan put up a slide. The 4 winds of conflict Gary Simmons talks about. These are all components that can come together, to make that storm rage. And if we're more aware of it and more aware of it in ourselves, we're going to have, I think, a much healthier situation as a group, as a nation, and as individuals. So number 1, separation. There's a great quote from Albert Einstein. Our separation from each other is an optical illusion. Psychologists say, that in the first 2 years of our life, it's odd because we're recognizing that we're connected with everybody else, but we're also discovering that being connected with everybody else can be pretty painful, or can be pretty unpleasant at the very least. And we're trying to get our needs met, and people aren't always meeting them. We separate ourselves from our experiences, from others, from ourselves, and also from God. And we get this illusion of safety because we're feeling like we're being able to start controlling the situation when so often we are not. And we just need to let go of that. But what happens at its essence is that we're unable to experience that God presence that's always here because we've separated ourselves in our own minds from it. Number 2 is misperception. And in so many sitcoms, just a half-hour sitcom is about a misperception. So you got one person thinking one thing, one person thinking the other thing, and of course it takes them 25 minutes to figure out that they're talking about different things or have different expectations or different assumptions in the situation. We have what Gary Simmons mentions in the book, a structure of knowing. So we've got all of these experiences in our life that we've had, both pleasant and unpleasant. And when we face a conflict or there's some energy that comes up, we're in our mind using our database to figure out, okay, what's going on here and how should I respond? And so often, we don't know how to respond. And that's a key moment when we get to that point where we can say, God, I don't have a clue on what to do here. And what happens at that point is we drop this structure of knowledge and allow divine mind to guide us as to what to do. What do I say here? What do I not say here? What do I do here? What do I not do here? We get to that edge of resourcefulness and we discover new things through us that can be done there to heal ourselves and heal the people around us. The edge of the kingdom of heaven, as Gary Simmons points it out. Now, as I've said before, there's the kingdom of God and then there's the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of God, as mentioned in the Gospels, is that realm where God is absolute, never changes, always there. Kingdom of heaven, though, is more relative. So we've got the absolute and the relative. In the kingdom of heaven is essentially our growing awareness that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. and the willingness to embrace that at a conscious level more often as we're going through the day. In the Gospel of Matthew, 13th chapter, 47th verse, Jesus is saying, the kingdom of heaven is like, giving all of these examples of the various ways we can grow in spiritual consciousness. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like a net which is thrown into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. And when the net was full, men drew the net ashore and sat down and sorted the fish, keeping the good ones and throwing away the bad ones. The kingdom of heaven is like this. We have our experiences. We have cast a net in our lives and brought on in all these experiences. We need to look at the ones that are good and the ones that are bad, getting rid of the ones that are bad and keeping the ones that are good. But in a year or two, you might find some of those experiences, some of those tools that you gained along the way may have been useful back then, but they're not useful now. One of the prime examples is, as a kid, don't talk to strangers. Well, that's an important safety device to use when you're a kid, but when you become an adult, it's pretty imperative that you talk to strangers occasionally. So, when it comes to misperception, be willing to dig a little bit deeper. Tell me more. Let's talk about this. What's the basic assumption you have about this situation? What's your perception? Well, here's what my basic assumption or perception is. And where we're willing to share with each other that, we'll find that by embracing the conflict, we can find a reconciliation, common ground, or at least a very healthy agreement to disagree. Number 3 is competition. Each of us has needs, goals, and values. All of us have basic needs, and here again, what was our experience as a kid? For me, like I said, one of my things was unworthiness, feeling unworthy, not feeling up to the standard of other people. And so often I would look for validation, or I would operate on the assumption of I don't want these people to realize that I'm unworthy or not good enough. So what are those kinds of issues for you? What's your attachments to the outcome? What do you want to see come out of the situation? This is where relationships are so important, because we come together and we need to recognize the difference between a win-win situation and a win-lose situation. Because if we're in a win-lose attitude, making ourselves right and other people wrong, that's not healthy. So do we take a healthy approach where we're supportive and empowering of other people? Or do we turn to cheating or incivility or other things that ruin the relationship, ruin the situation, cause a feeling of insecurity, a feeling of distrust? Number 4 is defensiveness. Now, in the spiritual realm, we're talking 2 polarities, love and fear. A lot of people think it's love and hate, but no, hate is a reaction to fear. Sometimes when someone is in fear, it's better to feel like you're getting aggressive, you can control the situation. So are you coming from love, or are you coming from fear in a particular situation? That's what it really comes down to. Because when we go into fear, our energy contracts, we get into the fight, flight, or freeze idea of do I fight? Do I run away? Do I freeze until I can figure out what to do next? Others pick up on this, right? I mean, when we're, remember, in Star Trek, they have sensors, and the sensors figure out if another ship has its force field up. We have that too. We walk into a room, if someone's got their force shield up, we intend to put our force shield up too. It's like, okay, there seems to be a perceived danger, a perceived harm that's possible in this room. So are we willing to let down our guard? Because conflict's got nowhere to go if we both got our shields up. But if one is saying, hey, I'm sensing something's going on in here. What's going on? What's up? What are your needs? I know, as many of you know, I worked in radio and TV news for like 17 years, and I was in Chicago. I was the editor, or the shift editor of WMAQ, and so I would be in charge of an 8-hour shift. I would arrive first, and then, my writers would arrive, and then my anchors would arrive, and then of course we had the reporters going all day long. But One day I came in and I started getting things organized for our shift. I worked the 3 to 11, so I was in charge of, when people drove home, they could get their half-hour newscast. And I started just picking up on an energy of anxiety. And I started looking around the room, and I realized that both of my regular writers had taken the day off, so we had people who worked on the weekend or part-timers had come in. And I could sense that they both were a little bit terrified, because this was the first time they had worked during a weekday where things are a little bit more rushed and all. And so I went over to them and said, "Hi, glad to have you here. I'm sensing you're feeling a little overwhelmed. Don't worry about it. I'll ease you into the shift rather than dumping, a whole half hour on you at once. We'll use some of the stuff from a few hours ago and until everybody's up to speed for the 5 o'clock, And they seem to be very grateful to that. And I sensed the energy just suddenly change and shift because I recognized something's going on here. Let's explore this a little bit more rather than ignoring it or getting caught up in the anxiety, putting up my force shield. So, in the book, The Eye of the Storm, Gary says that conflict is evidence that we're not being fully present, not giving someone our full attention, and not being authentic. And now, it happens to all of us. I know yesterday we had a vision team, meeting here where we're just kind of celebrating the accomplishments of the year. and I was partway through it, and I realized that I had my force shields up because there was something going on that I needed to make a decision about. And I wasn't fully giving my attention at the time. I was like, wow, here I am. We're trying to celebrate what we're experiencing, and my mind's off on some other thought wave. So I had to snap out of it. So we've got these 4 winds of conflict. What do? Well, we have the opportunity to overcome our conditioning. Our willingness to say, okay, this may have happened to me in the past, but I'm willing to rise above it, to transcend it. We can direct our attention to getting centered again. If we feel like we're in a hurricane, okay, go to the center. And within us, at the center is that sense that, okay, wow, wait a minute here. Outer appearances are not always against me. In fact, nothing and nobody is against me. Outer appearances, I don't buy into those. Instead, I go within and say, okay, what's going on here? What's my growth opportunity here? And be willing to tap into that divine mind, those divine ideas. When we're not feeling okay about ourselves, we're often looking outside of ourselves for the cure, when in reality, we need to go within and get the guidance. I don't know what to do. God, guide me. If we're spiritual beings having a human experience, then we recognize that I have thoughts, but I am not my thoughts. I have feelings, but I'm not my feelings. I'm not my emotions. I'm not my addiction. These are all things that we can experience, but we need to recognize that, but it's just part of me. And once we get comfortable with all of our parts and recognize they're all connected, they're all facets of a diamond that we have within ourselves. So which area of our life are we looking outside of ourselves, looking for love in all the wrong places? Is it in our health, our relationships, our occupation, our financial supply, or our connection with God? We need to go within to get it. We need to go to the center, giving it from within. So relationships. This is why relationships are so important. This is where the rubber meets the road. Being willing to interact with other people. Some people choose to go off and meditate in the cave for years at a time. But I think there's a reason that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. We bring out the best in each other if we're willing to. We can experience our wholeness and our worth. And within that arena of relationship, we have a relationship with life, with others, with ourselves. And if we're willing to dig a little deeper, we can find ways to have our needs met in a healthy way. We can know our oneness with God. Conflict is an opportunity to learn and to grow. I'm going to have Duncan put up the slide of our this week's takeaways. Of course, we've got the 4 winds of conflict. We've got separation, misperception, competition, and defensiveness. And then, of course, what do? Well, We get centered. We're willing to be present. I mean, you need to show up. And you need to be there to engage in a relationship. And then be willing to give, your full attention. And also willing for ourselves to be authentic. Yeah, this is who I really am. This is what I'm feeling. Or this is why I'm not quite myself today. Or I'm not quite full energy today. 3 of our 4 Gospels in our Bible give us the same story, and that is that some higher-ups in the Jewish religion come to one of Jesus' sessions and decide to test him, and they say, you know the 10 Commandments. Which of the 10 Commandments is the greatest? And in the Gospel of Luke, 10th chapter, 27th verse, Jesus says, the most important commandment is you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind. And the second one, it's almost as important, is you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So express love rather than fear. But where it says here, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, if I'm not okay with myself, if I'm self-loathing and all that, I'm going to lay that on other people. I'm loving other people as myself, or I'm fearing other people as myself. So be willing to express love rather than fear. Each of you has special gifts, passions, and talents that needs to be expressed in the world. And we all have our down days. We all have our up days. If we're willing, though, to help each other be the best that we can be, we recognize we are not alone. At the spiritual level, we're always connected. We're connected to each other. We're connected to the earth. We're always connected to God because we are a part of God, a cell in something larger than ourselves. Our closing story is about 2 young girls who still understand that we are all connected.